In this tutorial we'll have a look at all the controls that affect the timeline or the time space. Primarily that's everything around the perimeter here. I already have some clips loaded with color corrections, just something to populate the time space for now. So working around the perimeter first to see all the controls and readouts. Looking at the top, there's an information bar. Firstly, it'll tell us what version of software we're working on. It'll tell us the project name we're in. It'll tell us the name of the timeline. Within Mistika, .env is the file name used for saving a whole timeline, a whole edit. So you'll see those in the media browser. The title bar also tells us what resolution our system is optimized at and working at, and also what our video output is set to, because those two could be different. For example, you could be working at 4K internally, but sending out to a 2K projector. It says which preset we're working with from mconfig. Mconfig is Mistika's configuration background program, and this is where we would have chosen one of the presets, so it just tells us which one we're working with at the moment. And there's a status area here that will occasionally update and tell us what Mistika's up to, for example when it chooses to autosave and so on. This button here will allow you to completely hide all the controls to maximize the time-space area. You might wonder how you can work Mistika without any buttons, but Mistika can actually be controlled by gestural controls, which we haven't gone into yet. That'll be another tutorial. But just to say that, for example, if I wanted a stereo effect on that, if I drew an S, and on top of that, if I wanted a 3D comp, I'd draw a 3. I'm doing my drawing by pressing the rocker on the side of the pen downwards, but not actually tapping down, or on the mouse pressing the middle mouse button and drawing the gesture. But we'll come on to gestures later. Most of the time though, we'll have the dashboard up. As we saw in the quick start guides, these boxes here allow us to choose the vertical scale of the time space, ranging from tiny, then upwards to various sizes of clips to show various sizes of thumbnails. If you have a lot of clips on the timeline, you'll find that working without the thumbnails will probably allow you to move around the time space faster. If you have thumbnails on, when you first load your timeline, it'll just take a few seconds just to make all the thumbnails, if you have a lot of clips. When you're working with audio clips, the thumbnails are quite useful because they'll show you how many audio channels you've got, and also show you a waveform. So for example, if I just quickly grab in this link, which is an audio file, we can see as we drag through, I can see the waveform. I can see that there are 2 channels in this particular clip. Each clip can have up to 8. And this is an instance where perhaps I might use a big thumbnail if I was looking to edit some dialogue or something. The bar here is obviously a vertical positioner, which scales to however high our timeline is. We can also just click like this. On the keyboard, as long as your number lock is off, then the up and down arrows on the number pad itself will also allow you to jump up and down the timeline. It can be quite useful for things like here, you'll see that I've got a color correction over a shot, so I might use the timeline itself to kind of show me before and after. But within color grading, there's plenty of tools to do that externally. Down here we have methods to scale our timeline horizontally. So for example, each clip on here makes the timeline a little bit more condensed or more expanded outwards. If we tap down on this icon and drag left and right, we can be a bit more interactive about our X scale. Or alternatively, we can select clips. In this case, I'm lassoing a group and say scale to that selection. We can lock the timeline in any direction. At the moment, I can move the timeline however I want. I'm pressing down the right mouse button or the upper rocker button on the pen to do this. But if I put Y lock, then you can see it's behaving as you'd expect, or X lock. The number area here is actually the duration of the width of the window of time that we're seeing. So as you can see, as we scroll up and down the size, it'll tell us what this duration actually is. We can also type numbers in if we like, And as with every numeric box on Mistika, you can either type numbers in, or if you grab a number, you can drag up and down by tapping down or left mouse button and drag them accordingly. The numbers along the bottom here is the time code of the time space itself, so it marries with the time code we're seeing on the cursor here. Incidentally, we have it starting at 0. This is the grey line is the origin line, the 0 point on the timeline. It's only a human reference. It doesn't really matter to go beyond it, but it makes sense to start somewhere near the origin. And if you want to change it, under the Edit tab, it's actually here. So for example, if you wanted to change it to 10 hours, maybe to match the start time code of a tape. And you can see then that all the time codes have suitably shifted along. So this actually shows us the lighter grey area is again the width of our time space window, and so we can see that we're looking to plus 2 minutes ish from our center point down to minus 1 minute to the left hand point. We have an overview here that pops up just in case you manage to get yourself lost in the timeline. You know, if you've gone somewhere over here and can't remember where you are, then the overview will always scale to your timeline so you can find your way home. The little markers on the side show which tracks are populated. So at the moment we can see I'm only populating these 2 tracks. If on the other hand I'd move this up here, we can see that we've got these 2 populated. So they're just little markers so we can see what we've got where. It's helpful if you've got stuff off window and you can see that something else is existing elsewhere. Also what we can do here is if we click the little yellow marker and the dark grey line says that we're locking the entire track. So now I could move this, but I couldn't move this in any direction. So this is locking an entire track. We'll have a look under the edit functions later how we can lock individual clips. We've looked at the cursor before in the quick start. This is effectively the playhead, and whatever it sees looking downwards is what will play. It doesn't matter how deep it goes, because it will always look at the topmost clip or effect. But if it doesn't touch anything, then we don't see anything. To play, simply press the spacebar, and spacebar also stops. At the moment, just for this tutorial, I've actually switched my live video output off, just so I can see stuff down here. On a full Mistika where you have the external video board, normally this will now be playing to the external video board, and you'll see this extra number here, or these sets of numbers. The first number is the current timecode where it's playing. The second is the frame rate at which it's playing. The third number, which you'll only see if you're playing to the external video board, is a buffering number. Basically, Mistika uses its excess speed to read ahead on the timeline, so that if there are any parts where maybe the disk slows down or something like that, then it doesn't affect real-time playback, because this even now is already buffered 200 and something frames ahead. It also means that actually if you have a clip that didn't run in real time, sometimes you don't even need to render it, because as long as you've got enough of a run-up, it will have rendered it on the fly by the time you get there. I'll just switch my internal monitor back on, just so we can see on this tutorial. And that's just menu and live video off. We can use this aspect of the selective monitor to handle versions to a certain extent. For example, let's say this section here, these 3 shots. Someone says they'd like to see an alternative grade just on those 3 shots. Well, one way of handling it is if I select and hold down Alt while I drag, I've got a copy. So now what I'll do, just by way of an example, it's not very practical, is I'm putting another color corrector on top, because I can gang these together. Using my gestural controls, which we'll talk about later, I'm going to get the length of those, and I'm going to set the length of that. And then on this one, I'm just going to give it a different color. Now, because this color corrector runs across all those 3 shots, that's now a different color. Obviously, we'll look at color grading properly later. This is This is actually not a demonstration of color correction as such, it's just to show you how we can work with the monitor. So here, with the monitor high enough to accommodate these clips, pressing play, you'll see that I'm going to play the blue version of those shots. There it goes. Because at this point, the monitor is looking down to this clip. On the other hand, as soon as the client says, oh, can I see my other version, for example, then just playing down here will now mean that I'll get onto the original colors. So we can actually use this layout within the timeline to rapidly manage versions and tests and all that sort of stuff. There are other ways of doing it as well. Obviously we can save the timeline in different names, or we could, duplicate the entire edit, copy, paste, and then simply put that on whichever those three clips were. I think those are those three, I think. So now we have a whole film here that plays in one version and a whole film here that plays in the other. So you can see how you can use a timeline to keep up with all the different demands your clients make. Going down a line to here, under the time space, there are quite a few functions here that we'll cover rather in the editing section, although some are fairly obvious, like cut and paste. There are a couple that relate more to the timeline itself though. For example, here are your various shuttle controls. You'll notice there's a play and a buffered play. The buffered play is the look ahead, which is normal now. You can drag this to get a scanning through your timeline at any rate you like, or you can jump to the beginning or the end, or go back frame by frame, etc. A couple of useful keyboard shortcuts as well. The left and right arrows are a frame at a time, forwards or backwards. Control left and right will jump through the timeline one clip at a time. Here we can choose how our timeline is going to play, as in play from start to the end and then stop, get to the end and play backwards. I guess you might want to use that one day. Or play in a loop. And as the timeline is, the end is the last clip and the beginning is the first clip. But with these play marks here, we can define different areas. So based on a monitor cursor, if I put a start point for the play mark here and an end point for the play mark there and selected loop, then as I play this we can see that a loop will happen between those 2 points. If I want to wrap those play marks around a given selection, then that's what the 2 brackets here are for. And likewise to clear my play marks here and here. As we'll see with a lot of Mistika's functions, we can find out what the icons mean or what the shortcut keys are by pressing the middle or right mouse buttons or using the rocker on the pen over the icons. So with the down rocker or the middle mouse button, clicking on any of the icons will tell you what they are. So play in, play out, both together. On the other hand, right clicking or upper rocking on the pen will tell us what the designated short key is. So on play marks it's S for start, E for end, and both together it's W. Why W? Well, it's next to S and E on the keyboard. And as with a lot of functions with Mistika as well, to do something, for example, S for start, E for end, to clear them is simply Shift and that function. So to clear the start point, Shift S, Shift E. We can save our timeline. Of course we can save as our timeline, so we can save multiple versions. We'll look at the file types properly, but the blue ones here ending in .env, they're timelines. And you can have as many timelines as you want within a project. When you save a timeline, you'll always be saving in your current project, but you can happily grab environment files, timelines from any other project. Here are some shortcuts to rendering. We'll look at those another time. 2 mute buttons. Mute audio. I'm sure you'll work out what that one does. This one's a fun one. Mute video. As you can see, normally when I drag around, I'm getting a live update on my monitors. If I switch on mute video, it doesn't. There are rare occasions when you might want to switch this on. For example, if you have a very, very busy, slow timeline that you want to navigate around very quickly without necessarily seeing all the updates, then you can switch this on. But if you ever come to your Mistika and you can't get any pictures out of it at all and it's just not reacting to you, check this before you call support.